The chamber was silent. 412 species had gathered in the great assembly hall of the Galactic Concord, and not one of them spoke. The holographic display at the center showed a small, blue-green world spinning slowly in the void. Beautiful oceans covered most of its surface. Thick forests grew along its continents. Cities of coral and crystal dotted the coastlines, glowing with soft bioluminescent light. This world was called Velith Prime. It was home to 3 billion souls. In 90 days, it would be destroyed. Ambassador Threx Oloran of the Dominari rose from his seat. He was ancient by any standard, 600 years old. His scaled body bent with age, but his eyes still sharp. The Dominari had helped found the Concord 2,000 years ago. When Threx Oloran spoke, others listened. "The matter before us is simple," he said. His voice carried through the chamber without need for amplification. "The Velith civilization faces extinction. An asteroid cluster will impact their world in 90 standard days. They have no means to stop it. They have no means to escape. The question is whether we should intervene." He paused and looked around the chamber. "The doctrine of natural development is clear. We do not interfere in the natural course of civilizations. We do not save those who cannot save themselves. This is not cruelty. This is wisdom. The universe is harsh. Species that cannot overcome their challenges were never meant to persist." A murmur ran through the assembly. Some nodded in agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably. But no one challenged the words. In the human section of the chamber, Ambassador Sarah Chen gripped the arms of her chair until her knuckles turned white. Beside her, Admiral Yuki Tanaka sat perfectly still. Only her eyes moved, scanning the faces of the alien delegates around them. Humanity had joined the Concord only 80 years ago. They were considered probationary members, tolerated but not respected. Their war fleet was dismissed as primitive compared to the great armadas of the elder species. Their violent history was cited as evidence of barbarism. They had a voice in the assembly, but little real power. The Velith achieved radio communication only 12 years ago, Threx Oloran continued. They are centuries away from space travel. They do not know other species exist. They do not know they are about to die. The holographic display shifted to show the asteroid cluster. 17 massive rocks tumbled through space, each one large enough to cause catastrophic damage. Together, they would reduce Velith Prime to a burned and broken wasteland. "I call for a vote," Threx Oloran said. "All in favor of intervention, signal now." Lights appeared across the chamber as species voted. Chen counted them desperately. 14 lights glowed in favor. 14 out of more than 400. All opposed. The chamber lit up like a starfield. 387 lights, all voting to let the Velith die. "The motion fails," Threx Oloran announced. "The doctrine stands. No intervention will be permitted." Chen was on her feet before she realized she had moved. "This is murder," she said. Her voice echoed in the sudden silence. 3 billion people will die, and you're going to watch it happen. Threx Oloran turned his ancient eyes toward her. There was no anger in his gaze, only a kind of tired patience, as if he had heard these objections 1,000 times before. "Ambassador Chen," he said, "your species is young. You have not yet learned that the universe does not care about individual lives. It cares about the progress of civilization. The Velith may die, but others will rise. This is the way of things." "The way of things," Chen repeated. "Children will burn. Families will scream as fire falls from the sky. And you call that wisdom? I call it truth." Threx Oloran's voice was gentle but firm. "Your species nearly destroyed itself with nuclear weapons. Twice, you came within minutes of extinction. No one saved you. You saved yourselves. That is why you are here today. That is why you are strong." "We got lucky," Chen said. "We survived by accident, not design. And we swore we would never let others suffer the way we suffered." "A noble sentiment." Threx Oloran shook his great head. "But nobility does not change the doctrine. The vote has been taken. The matter is closed." The chamber began to empty. Species filed out in orderly groups, already discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes. The fate of the Velith was already forgotten, just another statistical tragedy in a galaxy full of them. Admiral Tanaka remained seated as the human delegation gathered their materials. Her face showed nothing, but her mind was racing. She had commanded Earth's Second Fleet for 15 years. She had fought pirates, rescued colonists, and defended human space against 3 separate alien incursions. She knew how to calculate odds. The odds here were not good. Earth's war fleet was small by galactic standards. 47 ships in the second fleet, another 60 scattered across human space. Against the combined might of the Concord, they were nothing. And if humanity intervened, if they violated the doctrine, they would face expulsion. Loss of trade agreements, loss of technology sharing, loss of protection for their colonies. It would be suicide. She watched the alien delegates file out. The Dominari with their scaled hides and ancient wisdom. The Etherian Collective, beings of pure energy who communicated in bursts of light. The Morthani Syndicate, insectoid traders who valued profit above all else. The Kreth Hierarchy, warriors who had conquered 100 worlds before the Concord brought them to heel. All of them had accepted the doctrine. All of them had watched species die and called it natural. All of them had forgotten what it meant to care about strangers. Admiral, Tanaka looked up. Ambassador Chen stood before her, face pale but composed. The shuttle is waiting, Chen said. Tanaka nodded and rose. As they walked through the empty chamber, she paused at the holographic display. The image of Velith Prime still rotated slowly, peaceful and unaware. She reached out and touched the projection. Her hand passed through oceans and forests, through cities where people lived and loved and dreamed of futures that would never come. 3 billion, she said quietly. I know. Chen's voice was thick. There's nothing we can do. If we intervene, we lose everything. Earth's colonies would be vulnerable. Millions of our own people could die. I know the math, Sarah. Then you know we have to let this go. Tanaka withdrew her hand. The hologram flickered and stabilized. Somewhere on that world, a child was probably looking up at the stars right now, wondering what was out there. In 90 days, that child would have an answer. Fire and death and the cold indifference of the universe. Get me everything we have on the Velith, Tanaka said. Geography, population centers, cultural data, everything. Chen stared at her. Yuki, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that I took an oath. To protect the innocent. To uphold what's right. Tanaka turned away from the display. I never swore to protect only human innocence. The Concord will destroy us. Maybe. Tanaka walked toward the exit. Or maybe they'll remember what they used to believe in. Before they got old. Before they got scared. The shuttle ride back to the UES Defiance was silent. Tanaka sat by the viewport, watching the Concord's massive space station shrink behind them. Thousands of ships surrounded it, trade vessels, diplomatic cruisers, war fleets from a dozen species. Any one of those fleets could crush humanity's entire military, but none of them were moving toward Velith Prime. When they reached the Defiance, Tanaka went straight to her ready room. Her executive officer, Commander James Okonkwo, was waiting with a data tablet. I heard about the vote, he said. I'm sorry, Admiral. I know you wanted a different outcome. The outcome isn't decided yet. Tanaka took the tablet. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha. Okonkwo's eyes widened. Priority Alpha? Admiral, that's for existential threats. Yes. Tanaka sat behind her desk. I'd say 3 billion lives qualifies. While she waited for the channel, she pulled up the intelligence files on the Velith. Images filled her screen. Amphibian beings with large eyes and delicate webbed hands. Their bodies glowed with bioluminescent patterns. Each individual's light was unique, like a fingerprint. They lived in harmony with their world, building cities that grew from the coral reefs rather than scarring the landscape. They had developed mathematics, philosophy, art. They had composed symphonies and written poetry. They had debated the meaning of existence and wondered if they were alone in the cosmos. They had no idea what was coming. One image made Tanaka stop. A photograph from a human probe that had passed through the system years ago. A Velith mother holding her child, both of them glowing softly in the twilight. The mother's patterns pulsed in a rhythm that researchers had identified as contentment. The child's light flickered with curiosity as it watched some small creature swim past. Tanaka touched the screen. The secure channel chimed. The face of Admiral William Hayes, Chief of Earth Defense Command, appeared. Yuki, he said. I heard about the vote. Damn shame. It doesn't have to end this way, Will. Hayes was silent for a long moment. They had known each other for 30 years. He had served under her father in the Mars campaign. He knew what she was about to ask. The political fallout would be catastrophic, he said quietly. Earth's position in the Concord is already worthless. We're probationary members, Will. We have no real power, no real voice. We're tolerated, not respected. Tanaka leaned forward. But this could change that. This could show the galaxy who we really are. Or it could get us all killed. Yes. Tanaka nodded. It could. But some things are worth dying for. Hayes closed his eyes. When he opened them again, she saw something she had rarely seen in his face. Hope, what do you need? He asked. Tanaka smiled. Send me everything. Every ship we can spare. Every engineer. Every pilot. Every soul willing to risk it all. She looked at the image of the Velith mother and child. We're going to save a world, Will. Whether the galaxy likes it or not. God help us, Hayes said. He might. Tanaka's smile faded. But I'd rather rely on good people with brave hearts. They've never let me down. The channel closed. Tanaka stood and walked to her viewport. The stars stretched out before her, cold and distant. Somewhere out there, the Velith were living their final days without knowing it. Not if she could help it. She opened a new channel. All senior officers, report to the briefing room. We have work to do. Consul Marinval had spent her entire life studying the sky. As the chief astronomer of the Velith people, she had mapped the movements of their 3 moons, tracked the patterns of distant stars, and wondered endlessly about what lay beyond her world. Now, standing in her observatory tower as the sun set over the phosphorescent sea, she finally understood. The sky was going to kill them all. She had discovered the asteroid cluster 3 days ago. At first, she thought her instruments were wrong. She checked them again and again, hoping desperately for an error. But the math did not lie. 17 massive objects were falling toward Velith Prime. They would arrive in 87 days. Her people had no word for extinction. They had never needed one. She turned away from her telescope and looked out at the city below. Velnar, the capital, spread across the coastline in graceful curves of coral and crystal. Millions of her people lived there, their bioluminescent patterns creating a soft glow that rivaled the stars. Children played in the shallow waters. Couples walked along the beaches. Elders gathered in the wisdom halls to discuss philosophy and art. None of them knew. Marinval had told no one yet. How could she? What words could possibly explain that everything they had ever built, everything they had ever loved, would soon be ash and memory? She closed her eyes and let her light dim. In moments like this, she wished she had chosen a different path. Perhaps she should have been a singer, creating beautiful harmonies that lifted the spirit, or a healer, mending broken bodies and troubled minds. Anything but this. Anything but the one who discovered the end. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. One of her assistants, young Terrell Kai, appeared at the doorway. His patterns flickered with excitement. Consul, you must come quickly. We have detected something strange. Marinval followed him to the main observation chamber. Other astronomers had gathered around the primary display, their lights pulsing with confusion and wonder. The image showed a section of space near the outer rim of their solar system. Ships. Dozens of ships. Appearing from nowhere. What are they? Terrell Kai asked. Consul, what are we looking at? Marinval stared at the display. The ships were unlike anything in Velith records. They were not natural phenomena. They were constructed things, made things, which meant they were made by someone. Her people were not alone. The realization should have filled her with joy. For generations, Velith philosophers had debated whether other minds existed in the cosmos. Now they had their answer. But all Marinval could feel was a cold dread settling in her hearts. Why were they here? What did they want? And did they know about the asteroids? Thousands of light years away, Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched her fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. 47 ships, the entirety of Earth's second fleet, had answered her call. They were joined by 18 additional vessels from various colonial defense forces, all crewed by volunteers who knew they might never return home. All ships reporting in, Commander Okonkwo announced. Fleet is at full readiness. Good. Tanaka studied the tactical display. Velith Prime hung at the center, blue and green and beautiful. The asteroid cluster was visible at the edge of the system. a swarm of death slowly drawing closer. Have the survey teams begin mapping the asteroids. I want full geological analysis within 6 hours. Understood, Admiral. Okonkwo hesitated. The Concord observer fleet has just arrived. 12 ships. They're holding position at the system's edge. Tanaka nodded. She had expected this. The Concord would not interfere directly. The doctrine forbade it, but they would watch. They would document humanity's defiance. And when it was over, they would pass judgment. Let them watch, she said. We have work to do. On the Concord flagship, Ambassador Threxaloran observed the human fleet with something he had not felt in centuries. Curiosity. He had seen many species challenge the doctrine over the millennia. Some had done so out of arrogance, believing themselves above the laws of the Concord. Others had acted from sentiment, unable to accept the harsh realities of existence. All of them had failed. All of them had learned, eventually, that the universe did not reward compassion, but the humans were different. They knew the consequences of their actions. They knew they faced expulsion, isolation, possibly destruction, and they had come anyway. Why? He turned to his aide, a young dominari named Krell Savin. Open a channel to the human flagship. I wish to speak with their commander. Moments later, Admiral Tanaka's face appeared on the display. She looked tired but determined. Her eyes held no fear. Ambassador Threxaloran, she said. I wondered when you would call. Admiral Tanaka, you understand that your presence here violates the doctrine of natural development? I understand the Concord has chosen to let 3 billion people die. I'm here to make a different choice. Threxaloran tilted his great head. The assembly vote was clear. Interference is forbidden. Your assembly doesn't speak for humanity. We answer to our own conscience. And when this is over, when you return to face judgment, Tanaka smiled. It was not a happy smile, but there was something fierce in it, something almost beautiful. Then we'll face it together, as a species that refused to watch innocence burn. The channel closed. Threxaloran sat in silence for a long moment. Beside him, Krell Savin shifted nervously. Ambassador, should we report this to the assembly? Yes. Threxaloran's voice was distant. Report everything, and tell them. Tell them I will remain to observe personally. I want to see how this ends. The next 2 weeks were a blur of activity. Human engineers worked around the clock, analyzing the asteroids and developing strategies to deflect them. The challenge was immense. The cluster was too large to destroy, and some of the individual rocks were the size of mountains. Simply blowing them apart would create thousands of smaller projectiles, turning one catastrophe into many. Instead, Tanaka's team proposed a different approach. Mass drivers would be attached to the largest asteroids, using sustained thrust to slowly alter their trajectories. Gravitational tugs, ships that would fly in formation with the asteroids. Using their own mass to pull them off course would handle the medium-sized threats. Precision nuclear detonations would vaporize the smallest rocks, creating jets of gas that pushed them away. It was a desperate plan. It required perfect coordination from every ship for 60 days. One mistake could doom everything, but it was possible. Barely. On day 23, Tanaka authorized first contact with the Velith. The shuttle descended through thick clouds, past flocks of flying creatures that scattered at its approach. Inside, Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos gripped her restraints and tried to slow her racing hearts. She had trained for this moment her entire career, but nothing could truly prepare someone for meeting an alien species. They landed on a beach outside Velnar. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. Hundreds of Velith stood at a safe distance, their bioluminescent patterns flickering with a rainbow of emotions. Fear, curiosity, wonder. Santos stepped out of the shuttle. The air was thick and humid, rich with the smell of salt and growing things. She raised her hand slowly, showing she carried no weapons. We come in peace, she said, knowing the words would mean nothing to them. The translation algorithms were still processing the Velith language. We are here to help. The crowd parted. An older Velith approached, her patterns pulsing in a steady rhythm that suggested authority. This was Consul Marinval, though Santos would not learn her name until later. Marinval stopped a few meters away. She studied the strange creature before her bipedal, covered in artificial skin, with tiny eyes and no bioluminescence at all. How did they communicate? How did they show what they felt? Then the creature pointed at the sky. It made a gesture, hands spread wide, then drawing together, then pushing outward. Marinval recognized it instantly. The asteroids. The creature was pointing at the asteroids, and then pushing them away. Understanding flooded through her. These beings had come from the stars. They knew about the death falling toward her world, and they were trying to tell her that they would stop it. Her light blazed with hope, the first hope she had felt in weeks. She stepped forward and extended her webbed hands. The strange creature hesitated, then reached out and grasped them gently. Behind them, the crowd erupted in patterns of joy and wonder. The sky beings had come. The sky beings would save them. News spread across Velith Prime within hours. The world went mad with celebration and terror and desperate hope. Some feared the aliens. Some worshipped them. Most simply tried to understand how everything they thought they knew had changed in an instant. Back on the Defiance, Tanaka watched the footage of first contact with tears in her eyes. She had served in the military for 30 years. She had given orders that sent people to their deaths. She had carried burdens that would crush lesser souls. But this moment, watching two species reach out across the void, bridging an impossible distance with nothing but hope, this was why she served. This was what it meant to be human. Admiral. Okonkwo's voice was urgent. We have a problem. She wiped her eyes and turned to face him. What is it? The Concord Observer Fleet. They're moving. The tactical display showed 12 ships breaking from their holding pattern. They were not heading toward Velith Prime. They were positioning themselves between the human fleet and the way home. Open a channel, Tanaka ordered. Threxoloran's face appeared. His expression was unreadable. Admiral Tanaka, I have received orders from the Assembly. You are to withdraw immediately. If you refuse, your ships will be impounded and your crew detained. We're not leaving, Ambassador. Not until the job is done. Then you leave me no choice. By order of the Galactic Concord, your fleet is hereby placed under blockade. No human vessel will leave this system until the Assembly has rendered judgment. The channel closed. Tanaka stared at the display for a long moment. Around her, the bridge crew waited in tense silence. Well, she said finally, I suppose that settles it. We're committed now. Admiral? Okonkwo stepped closer. What do we do? Tanaka looked at the image of Velith Prime. Somewhere down there, a Velith astronomer was looking up at the sky, seeing human ships for the first time, hoping, believing. We do what we came to do, Tanaka said. We save them, all of them, and when it's over, we face whatever comes. She turned to her crew. Get me the fleet commanders. We have 60 days to change the course of history. Let's not waste a second. The first asteroid was called Target Alpha. It was 4 kilometers across a mountain of iron and ice, tumbling through the void at 30 kilometers per second. If it hit Velith Prime, it would create an impact, winter that would last a century. Nothing would survive. Commander James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the UES Resolution and watched his ship approach the massive rock. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. They had trained for this. They had prepared for months. But nothing could truly prepare a person to wrestle with a force of nature. Engineering. Status report, he called out. Mass driver is ready for deployment, Commander. We're green across the board. Helm, bring us within 500 meters. Nice and steady. The Resolution crept closer to the asteroid. At this distance, it filled the view screen, a dark gray surface pitted with craters, spinning slowly in the starlight. Somewhere on that surface, they would plant the device that would save 3 billion lives. Commander. His tactical officer's voice was tense. I'm reading instability in the asteroid's rotation. It's not spinning smoothly. There's a wobble. Okonkwo frowned. A wobble meant unpredictable movement. Unpredictable movement meant danger. Can we compensate? I think so. But it's going to make deployment tricky. The surface is shifting every few minutes. We'll have a narrow window to anchor the mass driver. Then we take the narrow window. Okonkwo keyed the comm. Engineering, prepare for deployment. We go in 60 seconds. The mass driver was an elegant piece of technology, essentially a giant electromagnetic cannon. It would fire chunks of the asteroid itself into space at tremendous speed. Each ejection would push the asteroid slightly in the opposite direction. Over days and weeks, those tiny pushes would add up. The asteroid's path would shift. Velith Prime would be spared. In theory, deployment team is ready, engineering reported. Launch. A small shuttle detached from the Resolution, carrying 4 engineers and the mass driver assembly. They descended toward the asteroid, matching its rotation, finding the optimal landing site. The shuttle touched down and anchored itself with magnetic clamps. The engineers climbed out in their pressure suits and began assembling the device. Okonkwo watched the operation with held breath. Minutes passed. The asteroid continued its slow wobble, threatening to throw the engineers off with each shift. But they worked with steady hands, locking each component into place with practiced precision. Mass driver is secured, the team leader reported. Beginning power-up sequence. Resolution acknowledges. All ships target Alpha is online. Commencing deflection in. A proximity alarm screamed. Okonkwo spun to face the tactical display. A fragment, a piece of debris they had not detected, was falling toward the asteroid. It would hit in 30 seconds. Deployment team, emergency evacuation. Get to the shuttle now. The engineers scrambled across the surface. 2 made it to the shuttle. The third slipped, his magnetic boots failing to grip the loose rock. He tumbled across the surface, desperately reaching for anything to hold. The 4th engineer, Lieutenant Chen Wei, did not run for the shuttle. Instead, he ran toward his falling comrade. He grabbed the man's arm and threw him toward the ship, using the momentum to push himself in the opposite direction. The fragment hit. The asteroid shuddered. A plume of debris erupted from the surface, engulfing the spot where Chen Wei had been standing. "Chen Wei, respond," Okonkwo shouted. "Chen Wei, do you copy?" Static. Then, impossibly, a voice. "I'm here, Commander." Got thrown clear. I'm okay. I think. Relief flooded the bridge. The shuttle retrieved both engineers, and the Resolution pulled back to a safe distance. The mass driver had survived the impact. It was already firing, hurling chunks of rock into space, beginning the long process of saving a world. But the mission had nearly failed in its first hour, and they had 16 more asteroids to go. Across the system, similar scenes played out. Ships deployed gravitational tugs alongside medium-sized asteroids, flying in precise formation to slowly pull them off course. Nuclear devices were carefully placed on smaller rocks, their detonations calculated to the millisecond. Every ship, every crew, every individual worked toward a single goal. And on Velith Prime, the people watched. Marinval had established a communication link with the humans. It was primitive, mostly gestures and simple images, but it was enough. She understood that the sky beings were fighting to save her world. She understood that they faced great danger. She understood that some of them might die. What she did not understand was why. The humans had nothing to gain from this. They had come from across the stars, risking their lives and their future, for people they had never met, people who could offer them nothing in return. It made no sense by any logic Marinval could understand, and yet here they were. She organized her people to help in whatever way they could. Fresh water was harvested from the deep trenches and transported to orbit, refilling the humans' reserves. Food was prepared and offered, though much of it proved incompatible with human biology. Musicians composed songs of gratitude and broadcast them toward the stars, hoping the sky beings would understand. Most importantly, the Velith watched. They tracked every ship, every operation, every success and setback. They learned the names of the human vessels: Defiance, Resolution, Horizon, Dawn. They created stories about the beings who crewed them, heroes from another world, fighting against the darkness. On day 37, disaster struck. The UES Horizon was positioned alongside Target Delta, a 3-kilometer asteroid that required careful handling. The gravitational tug operation was going smoothly until a hidden vein of ice suddenly vaporized, creating a jet of gas that pushed the asteroid directly into the ship. The collision was catastrophic. Horizon's hull cracked open. Atmosphere vented into space. 12 crew members were killed instantly. Admiral Tanaka received the news in her ready room. She sat in silence for a long moment, then requested the names of the fallen. She wrote each one down by hand. She would memorize them later. She would carry them with her for the rest of her life. But she could not stop. Not now. Not with so much still at stake. "Get me the fleet commanders," she said. "We need to redistribute resources. Horizon's mission has to continue." 3 ships adjusted their positions to cover for the lost vessel. The deflection of target Delta resumed within hours, but the cost weighed heavily on everyone. On the Concord Observer flagship, Threxaloran watched the humans mourn their dead. He saw them gather in small groups, holding each other, weeping openly. He saw them speak words over the bodies before sending them toward Valeth's sun, a burial of fire and light. And then he saw them return to work. They did not give up. They did not question whether the mission was worth the price. They simply continued, bearing their grief and their duty with equal measure. Something stirred in Threxaloran's ancient hearts, something he had thought long dead. Doubt? He turned to his aide. Krell Savin, what do you know of human history? Only what is in the archives, Ambassador. They are a young species. Violent. They nearly destroyed themselves multiple times before achieving space travel. Yes. And do you know why they survived? I do not understand the question. Threxaloran returned his gaze to the tactical display. The human fleet was scattered across the system, each ship locked in a desperate struggle against physics and time. Exhausted crews pushed themselves beyond all limits. Broken ships were repaired with whatever materials could be found. Every obstacle was met and overcome. Neither do I, he admitted. But I begin to think we have misjudged them. Day 45. Target Gamma, the largest asteroid, was not responding to deflection attempts. The mass driver had failed. The gravitational tugs were not strong enough. The rock continued on its deadly course. Tanaka studied the projections. If Gamma hit Velith Prime, it would cause an extinction-level event. All the work they had done would mean nothing. Options, she said to her senior officers. We could try a direct nuclear strike, offered Commander Santos. Vaporize a portion of the surface to create thrust. The simulations show a 40% chance of fragmenting the asteroid. That would make things worse. What about combined mass drivers? If we concentrate multiple ships, we don't have enough ships. Most of our fleet is committed to other targets. Silence fell over the briefing room. Everyone knew what the numbers meant. They were going to fail. There is one option. The voice belonged to Chief Engineer Patricia Obi. She was an older woman, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, who had designed half the systems keeping the fleet operational. We could use a ship as a kinetic impactor. The room went still. You're talking about ramming the asteroid, Tanaka said quietly. Yes. The Defiance has enough mass to significantly alter Gamma's trajectory. We would need to accelerate to maximum velocity and impact at the optimal angle. The resulting force would push the asteroid off course. And the ship? The crew? Obi's face was steady. The ship would be destroyed. The crew would need to evacuate beforehand. Skeleton crew only just enough to keep her on course until impact. Tanaka closed her eyes. The Defiance was her ship. She had commanded her for 8 years. She knew every corridor, every system, every quirk of her aging engines. The thought of sacrificing her felt like cutting out a piece of her own heart. But 3 billion lives outweighed one ship. That was the math. That was always the math. Begin preparations, she said. I want evacuation procedures ready within 24 hours. Admiral? Okonkwo's voice was heavy. If we do this, who stays aboard? Who flies her into the rock? Tanaka looked at her first officer, at the engineers and tactical officers and pilots who had followed her across the stars. These were her people, her family. How could she ask any of them to die? I'll ask for volunteers, she said. I won't order anyone to stay. When the announcement went out, 47 people volunteered. Pilots, engineers, gunners, medics. Every department was represented. Every age, every background, every story. Tanaka reviewed the list with tears streaming down her face. Then she began the terrible task of choosing who would live and who would die. On Velith Prime, Marinval received word of the plan. She did not fully understand the technical details, but she understood the essential truth. One of the sky ships would sacrifice itself to save her world. Some of the sky beings would give their lives so that the Velith could continue. She gathered her people in the great plaza of Velnar. Millions watched as she stood before them, her patterns blazing with emotion. The strangers are willing to die for us, she said. They ask nothing in return. They expect no reward. They simply believe that our lives have value, that we deserve to exist. She paused, letting her light pulse with the weight of her words. I do not know how to repay such a gift. I do not know if it is even possible. But I know this. We must remember. We must tell our children. and their children after them. We must never forget that when the sky fell, strangers came from beyond the stars and caught it with their bare hands. Across the planet, Velith bioluminescence blazed in response. Every city, every village, every isolated home, all of them lighting up in a display of gratitude and grief and hope. The signal reached the human fleet. Sensors detected the sudden increase in light from the planet's surface. Admiral Tanaka stood at her viewport and watched Velith Prime glow like a beacon in the darkness. "They know," she whispered. "They understand." She turned back to her duties. There was still work to do, and 53 days had passed. 37 remained. The countdown continued. Day 58. The Defiance hung in space above Velith Prime, her engines cold, her crew preparing for the end. Admiral Tanaka walked through the corridors of her ship one last time. Every surface held a memory. Here, the mess hall where her crew had celebrated birthdays and victories. There, the engineering bay where Chief Obi had performed miracles with nothing but spare parts and determination. The bridge where she had commanded men and women through impossible situations. All of it would be gone soon. She had selected her skeleton crew, 47 volunteers who would stay aboard until the last possible moment, then evacuate on the ship's remaining shuttles. The timing was critical. Leave too early, and the Defiance might drift off course. Leave too late, and the shuttles would not clear the blast radius. Tanaka herself would remain longest. That was not negotiable. "Admiral." Commander Okonkwo's voice came over the comm. "Final preparations are complete. All non-essential personnel have been transferred to other ships." "Thank you, James." She paused outside her ready room. "I want you to know, it's been an honor serving with you. Don't talk like that. You're coming back. The evacuation plan is solid." "Of course." She smiled, though he could not see it. "I'll see you on the other side." She entered the ready room and found Chief Engineer Obi waiting. The older woman had insisted on being part of the skeleton crew. Tanaka had tried to refuse her, but Obi was stubborn. "The engines are prepped for maximum burn," Obi reported. "We'll hit target gamma at 40 kilometers per second. The impact should deflect it by approximately 3 degrees. That's enough." "Should?" "The calculations are solid. But this isn't an exact science. There are variables we can't predict." Obi met her eyes. "But I believe it will work. I believe we'll save them." "That's good enough for me." The final countdown began at 0600 hours. Tanaka took her place on the bridge, surrounded by the 46 other volunteers. Most of them were young junior officers, enlisted crew, people who had their whole lives ahead of them. She had tried to convince them to stay behind. They had refused. "All hands. This is the Admiral." Her voice was steady over the ship-wide comm. "In 3 hours, we will begin our final approach to target gamma. Most of you will evacuate before impact. Some of us will stay until the end." She paused. "I want you to know that I have never been prouder to serve with any crew. Whatever happens today, we will be remembered. Not as warriors, not as conquerors, but as people who chose to save strangers when no one else would." She released the comm. The bridge was silent. Then, one by one, the crew returned to their stations. There was work to do. On the Concord Observer flagship, Threxaloran watched the Defiance begin its acceleration. The human ship was old by any standard, outdated engines, primitive weapons, a hull that showed the scars of countless battles. Against the sleek vessels of the Concord, it looked like a relic from another age, but there was something beautiful about it. Something that stirred emotions Threxaloran had thought long dead. "Ambassador." Krellsaven approached hesitantly. "The other observer ships are requesting instructions. Should we maintain position?" Threxaloran did not answer immediately. He watched the Defiance grow smaller on the display, racing toward a mountain of iron and death. He thought about the doctrine of natural development, the philosophy he had defended for 600 years, the wisdom of non-interference, the cold logic of letting nature take its course. And he thought about the humans, their short lives, their violent history, their stubborn refusal to accept what the galaxy called inevitable. "Krellsaven," he said slowly, "what do the other observer ships think of what we are witnessing?" "They are conflicted, Ambassador. Some believe the humans are fools. Others," the aide hesitated, "others are not so certain. Neither am I." Threxaloran rose from his command chair. Open a channel to the fleet. The faces of 11 Concord captains appeared on the display. Dominari, Etherian, Morthani, Kreth representatives of the galaxy's greatest powers. All of them awaited his orders. "I am going to ask you a question," Thraxaloran said, "and I want you to answer honestly, without regard for politics or protocol." He paused. "If that ship fails, if the humans cannot save the Velith on their own, what will you do?" Silence. The captains glanced at each other, uncertain. Finally, a Kreth commander spoke. Her name was Vrath Kellen, and she had conquered a dozen worlds before the Concord brought peace. "I will watch them die, as the doctrine requires." "Is that what you want?" Another silence. Longer this time. "No," Vrath Kellen admitted. "It is not what I want. But the doctrine was written by beings who believed that strength was the only virtue worth preserving." Thraxaloran's voice carried an edge it had not held in centuries. "They believed that species which could not save themselves did not deserve to exist. And for 2,000 years, we have followed that belief. We have watched civilizations burn and called it natural." He looked at the display showing the Defiance. The ship was accelerating faster now, committed to its course. But what if we were wrong? What if there is another kind of strength, the strength to risk everything for strangers? The strength to care about lives that are not our own? "Ambassador," an Etherian captain said, "you speak of revolution. The Assembly would never accept such heresy. Perhaps, but I am old. I have lived longer than most, and I have seen more than I care to remember. And I tell you now, I do not want to watch these humans sacrifice themselves while we do nothing. I do not want to spend whatever years I have left, knowing that I could have helped and chose not to." He straightened, his ancient body finding a strength he had thought lost. "I am not ordering you to follow me. This must be a choice, freely made. But I am going to help them. If that means expulsion from the Concord, so be it. If it means the end of my career, my position, my very life, so be it." He met each captain's eyes in turn. "Who will stand with me?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Vrath Kellen, the Kreth warrior who had conquered worlds, bowed her massive head. "I will stand with you. My ancestors would have called this foolishness, but my ancestors never saw anything like this." One by one, the other captains signaled their agreement. Etherian lights flickered in assent. Morthani clicked their mandibles in approval. Even the Dominari Thraxaloran's own people cast aside millennia of tradition. "Then follow me," Thraxaloran commanded. "The humans have taught us what true strength looks like. Let us show them that we can learn." 12 conquered ships broke formation and raced toward the Defiance. On the bridge of the human flagship, Tanaka watched the tactical display with disbelief. The observer fleet was moving, not away from the system toward it. Toward her. "Admiral," her tactical officer's voice cracked with surprise. "The Concord ships are approaching at high speed. They're hailing us." On screen, Thraxaloran's face appeared. His ancient eyes held something Tanaka had never seen in them before. "Hope. Admiral Tanaka. We are here to help. Ambassador, if you interfere, the Concord will. The Concord will do what it will. I have chosen my path." He paused. "Our ships have mass. They have engines. They can add their strength to yours. Perhaps, together, we can move this mountain without sacrifice." Tanaka's vision blurred with tears. "Ambassador, I don't know what to say." "Then say nothing. Simply tell us where we are needed." The next hour was chaos. 12 Concord ships joined the Defiance in a desperate formation around Target Gamma. Combined mass drivers fired in perfect synchronization. Gravitational tugs pulled from multiple angles. The asteroid groaned and shifted, its trajectory bending under the collective force of human and Concord alike. The math was still tight. Too tight. Even with the additional ships, the deflection was not enough. Gamma would still clip Velith Prime's atmosphere, not a direct hit, but enough to cause catastrophic damage. "We need more thrust," Obi reported. 10% more, and we'll clear the planet entirely." "The engines are at maximum," Tanaka replied. "We don't have 10%. "I do." The voice came from outside the bridge. Everyone turned to see Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos standing in the doorway. "The shuttle bay. We have 6 shuttles left. If we launch them at maximum acceleration directly into the asteroid's trailing edge, the combined impact could provide the additional thrust." That would use up our evacuation vehicles. Not all of them. We keep 2. Enough for the skeleton crew. Santos met Tanaka's eyes. It's a risk, but it might work. Tanaka calculated the odds. They were not good, but they were better than 0. Do it. 4 shuttles launched, their engines screaming as they accelerated toward the asteroid. One by one, they slammed into Gamma's surface, their explosive impacts adding precious momentum to the deflection effort. The asteroid shuddered. Its path shifted. Slowly, impossibly, it began to curve away from Velith Prime. It's working, Obi shouted. We're getting the deflection we need. But the celebration was short-lived. The Defiance's engines, pushed beyond their limits, began to fail. Warning lights flashed across every console. Hull breaches opened in 3 sections. The ship was dying. All hands evacuate, Tanaka ordered. Everyone to the remaining shuttles, now. The skeleton crew scrambled for the exits. Tanaka remained at the helm, fighting to keep the Defiance on course. Every second mattered. Every meter of trajectory change could mean the difference between salvation and extinction. Admiral, we have to go. Okonkwo grabbed her arm. Not yet. The course isn't locked in. It's good enough. The ship is breaking apart. An explosion rocked the bridge. Consoles sparked and shattered. Tanaka felt the deck tilt beneath her feet. The Defiance was listing, her engines failing, her hull cracking under the strain. Admiral! Okonkwo pulled her toward the exit. Please. Tanaka took one last look at her bridge, her home for 8 years, then allowed herself to be dragged away. They ran through corridors filled with smoke and debris, past sealed bulkheads and emergency lights, until they reached the shuttle bay. 2 shuttles remained. The skeleton crew was piling in, wounded and exhausted but alive. Tanaka counted heads as they climbed aboard. 46, 47. Everyone had made it. The shuttles launched just as the Defiance's reactor went critical. The explosion lit up the void, a brief, brilliant flare that rivaled the stars. When it faded, nothing remained but scattered debris. But Target Gamma continued on its new path, missing Velith Prime by 12,000 kilometers. On the observation deck of Threxaloran's flagship, Tanaka watched the asteroid sail past the planet she had come to save. Behind it, the other rocks tumbled harmlessly through space, deflected, destroyed, defeated. It was over. They had won. Beside her, Threxaloran stood in silence. The ancient Dominari had not spoken since picking up the human survivors. Now, finally, he turned to face her. I owe you an apology, Admiral. For what? For underestimating your species. For believing that compassion was weakness. He bowed his great head. I have lived 600 years, and I thought I understood the universe. I was wrong. Tanaka looked out at Velith Prime. The planet glowed softly in the starlight, alive and safe and full of hope. 3 billion souls, saved by strangers from the stars. You weren't wrong to be cautious, she said. The universe is dangerous. Species do die. But that doesn't mean we have to accept it. That doesn't mean we can't try. No. Threxaloran agreed. It does not. On the surface below, Marinval watched the sky clear of asteroids. Around her, her people wept and celebrated, their bioluminescence blazing with joy. The strangers had kept their promise. The sky beings had saved them all, and the Velith would never forget. The great assembly hall of the Galactic Concord had never been so full. Over 500 species had gathered, more than had attended any session in living memory. They filled every seat, crowded every balcony, packed every corridor. Holographic displays allowed billions more to watch from across the galaxy. At the center of the chamber, Admiral Yuki Tanaka stood alone. She had been summoned to face judgment. The charges were clear. Violation of the doctrine of natural development, unauthorized interference in the affairs of a pre-spaceflight civilization, and conspiracy with rogue elements of the Concord Observer Fleet. The penalties could range from formal censure to complete expulsion of humanity from galactic society. Tanaka had expected this. She had prepared for it. But standing in that vast chamber, facing the collected judgment of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, she felt very small indeed. Admiral Tanaka, the voice of the assembly speaker, a crystalline being called Velox Prime, resonated through the hall. You have been charged with grave violations of Concord law. How do you plead? I acknowledge my actions. Tanaka replied. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. I do not regret them. A murmur swept through the assembly. The speaker raised a limb for silence. The facts are not in dispute. Your fleet entered the Velith system without authorization. You deployed military resources to alter the course of natural events. You made contact with a pre-spaceflight species. These are clear violations of the doctrine. Yes, they are. Then you admit your guilt? I admit what I did. I do not admit that it was wrong. Tanaka straightened her shoulders. The doctrine was written to prevent powerful species from exploiting weaker ones. It was meant to protect developing civilizations from manipulation and control. But somewhere along the way, it became something else. It became an excuse to do nothing, while innocents died. The doctrine has preserved order for 2,000 years, the speaker replied. It has prevented countless wars, countless instances of cultural contamination, countless abuses of power. And how many species has it killed? Tanaka's voice rose. How many civilizations have burned while the Concord watched and called it natural? The Velith would have joined that list. 3 billion people would be dead right now if we had followed your rules. That is the way of the universe. Species rise and fall. Those who cannot save themselves were never meant to persist. Yes, I've heard that philosophy. Tanaka stepped forward, her eyes blazing. But let me tell you what I believe. I believe that every life has value. I believe that the measure of a civilization is not how much power it accumulates, but how it uses that power to protect others. I believe that watching children die when you have the ability to save them is not wisdom, it is cowardice. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in a dozen languages. Some demanded Tanaka's immediate expulsion. Others called for silence. The speaker struggled to restore order. Through it all, Tanaka stood firm. Finally, a new voice cut through the chaos. Ancient, weathered, but carrying an authority that silenced every other speaker. If the assembly will permit, I wish to address this matter. Ambassador Threxaloran rose from his seat. He descended to the speaker's floor slowly, his aged body showing every one of his 600 years. But his eyes were sharp, and his voice was strong. I have served the Concord for longer than most species in this chamber have existed, he began. I helped write the doctrine of natural development. I have defended it countless times against those who called it cruel or unjust. And until recently, I believed with all my heart that it represented the highest wisdom our civilization had achieved. He turned to face the assembly, his gaze sweeping across the gathered delegates. I was wrong. The chamber went utterly silent. I watched the humans risk everything to save the Velith. I watched them sacrifice their ships, their careers, their very lives for strangers they had never met. And I asked myself, when was the last time the Concord did anything so noble? He paused, letting the question hang in the air. We have become comfortable in our power. We have convinced ourselves that non-interference is virtue, when in truth it is simply easier than caring. We have built a philosophy around our fear of conflict, and we have called it wisdom. He turned to face Tanaka. This human taught me something I had forgotten. Strength is not only the power to destroy, it is also the power to protect. And the choice to protect, especially when the cost is high, is the truest measure of what a civilization really is. Another voice spoke, Vrath Kellen, the Kreth warrior who had helped save the Velith. I agree with the ambassador. My people conquered worlds for generations. We believed that might made right. The Concord taught us otherwise. But perhaps we learned the wrong lesson. Perhaps we stopped conquering. But we also stopped caring. One by one, other delegates rose. Some spoke in favor of humanity. Others defended the doctrine. The debate went on for hours, then days. Arguments were made and countered. Ancient grievances were raised and addressed. The very foundations of Concord philosophy were questioned for the first time in millennia. On the third day, the assembly called for a vote. First, on the matter of humanity's expulsion. The motion failed by a margin of 12 votes. Humanity would remain in the Concord. Second, on the matter of the doctrine of natural development. A Reformation Council was proposed, a committee to review the doctrine and suggest amendments. The motion passed by 7 votes. It was not a revolution. The doctrine still stood. But cracks had appeared in its foundations. Seeds of change had been planted, and Admiral Yuki Tanaka, the woman who had defied the galaxy to save 3 billion lives, was not punished. She was quietly honored. 1 year later, Tanaka returned to Velith Prime. The planet had changed since her last visit. Human technology had begun to spread carefully, slowly, with respect for Velith culture and values. A new observatory stood on the coast near Velnar. Its gleaming domes pointed toward the stars. Young Velith scientists worked alongside human engineers, learning to read the cosmos that had nearly destroyed them. Marinval waited at the entrance. She had aged in the past year, her bioluminescence dimmer than before, but her eyes still held the same sharp intelligence Tanaka remembered. Admiral Tanaka. Marinval extended her webbed hands. Welcome back to our world. Consul Marinval. Tanaka grasped the hands gently. It's good to see you again. They walked through the observatory together. Marinval pointed out the various instruments, explaining their functions and the discoveries they had already made. Her people were learning faster than anyone had expected. Within a generation, they would be ready for space travel. We have been talking about the future, Marinval said as they reached the main observation deck. My people. We have been deciding what kind of civilization we want to become. And what have you decided? Marinval looked up at the stars. The night sky blazed with distant suns, each one a possibility, a destination, a potential ally, or enemy. We have decided that when we reach the stars, we will not forget how we got there. We will remember that strangers risked everything to save us, and we will pass that gift along. She turned to face Tanaka. When we find other species in danger, young civilizations facing threats they cannot overcome, we will not watch them die. We will help them, as you helped us. We will be the ones who show up. Tanaka felt tears prick at her eyes. That's a beautiful goal. It is more than a goal. It is a promise. Marinval's patterns pulsed with deep emotion. We have created a word for it in our language. We call it Vel Tanaka. It means, those who hold light for others. Tanaka blinked. You named it after me? After all of you. After every human who came to our world and refused to let us die. Marinval reached out and placed her hand over Tanaka's heart. Your species has given us a gift we can never repay. But we can honor it. We can live by it. And perhaps, in time, we can spread it across the galaxy. For a long moment, Tanaka could not speak. She thought of the 12 crew members who had died aboard the Horizon. She thought of the Defiance, breaking apart in the void. She thought of all the sacrifices, all the risks, all the moments when failure had seemed certain. And she thought of the children she had seen playing in the phosphorescent waters of Velnar. Children who were alive because strangers had cared. Thank you. She finally managed. That means more than I can say. They stood together in the observatory, watching the stars wheel slowly overhead. Somewhere out there, other civilizations were struggling to survive. Other species were facing extinction. Other worlds were burning. But now there was hope. Now there were people willing to do something about it. The galaxy was still dangerous. The universe was still harsh. But a new idea had taken root, an idea that compassion was strength, that protection was power, that the highest achievement of any civilization was not what it conquered, but what it saved. And that idea had started with humanity. It had started with a single woman who looked at a world of strangers and said, "Not on my watch." Years later, when historians wrote about the events at Velith Prime, they would debate the politics and the philosophy. They would analyze the military operations and the diplomatic consequences. They would argue about whether humanity had been right to defy the Concord, and whether the changes that followed had been for better or worse. But on Velith Prime itself, the story was simpler. It was a story told to children at bedtime, a story painted on the walls of temples and schools, a story that defined what it meant to be Velith in a galaxy full of wonders and dangers. It was the story of the day the sky fell, and strangers came from beyond the stars to catch it. It was the story of the Vel Tanaka, those who hold light for others, and it always ended the same way. An old Velith would lean close to a young one and whisper, "When you grow up, when you travel to the stars, remember this, you are alive because someone cared. Now go and do the same for others." And the children would look up at the night sky, at the tiny dots of light that were human ships still visiting their world, and they would dream of the day when they too could hold light for someone else. The end was just the beginning, and humanity, for all its flaws and failures, had shown the galaxy what it meant to be truly strong. Not the strength to conquer, not the strength to destroy, but the strength to save. That was their legacy. That was their gift. That was what they would be remembered for. Long after empires had risen and fallen, long after the stars themselves had dimmed, those who hold light for others, the Vel Tanaka, humanity,